So, just going to say a few things about the representation of young people in the media. As ever, a good place to start your answer is with a definition of the concept of representation. Representation being the way in which groups, people, places, events are portrayed in the media. That this is the result of a process of selection and omission, and that these constructions are built using a range of visual, technical, audio and narrative codes. From there, I would aim to link the representation of young people and mention that they are often demonised by the media, that they are often linked to moral panics going back decades, to the mods and the rockers, through the hippies of the 60s, the punks of the 70s, the ecstasy generation of the 80s, the emos of the 90s, and to whatever generation that I'm too old and out of it to have noticed at the moment, that are going out there doing the usual stuff, the roadmen maybe. From the look at the three texts that we have talked about in lessons. So a good starting point is the 2009 action film Harry Potter. This very much gives us a very negative stereotype of young people. We saw in that opening sequence, filmed via, to give it that gritty, grainy, authentic look, of being filmed on a mobile phone, to link to the moral panic of happy slapping that around the time of 2009 was an epidemic in society. The young people wear the costume, all black, faces obscured, the setting, a graffiti-strewn subway, then we go out from there into the high-rise flats that the young people are terrorising on the moped. We see a young person being initiated into gang culture, the usual slang as part of the mode of address, and the props are guns, they're drugs. We see a very, very bleak, negative portrayal of the young. Now, this is a film that exists to challenge stereotypes, but not the stereotype of young people. In challenging the stereotype of the old through the character of Harry Brown, who goes from this, in typical old person sucking on his aspirin inhaler first thing in the morning, going through his grim, dreary routine, he's transformed into a vigilante killer. The young people, meanwhile, are the demons who need to be slain in this film. A film that starts in a similar way is the 2011 film Attack the Block. This also begins with a mugging, it begins with graffiti, it begins with the high-rise flats, the blocks, synonymous with young people as scourges of society of broken Britain. And as the group step up and mug poor, defenceless Sam, they then refer to by her, and she echoes the words of a neighbour to her. They're fucking monsters, aren't they? And Sam very much agrees with that at this point in the narrative. From there, however, the director Joe Cornish has gone out of his way to actually dismantle this stereotypical representation of young people. Indeed, throughout the film, he makes kind of explicit nods to the moral panics that have swirled around young people when the gang are ready to run out and take on the aliens. They say this is not about guns and drugs and rap music and violence in computer games. Later on in the film, rather than pin blame on targets like that, we get to learn that the chief protagonist, Moses, lives with his uncle, who comes and goes mostly, in a flat that's barely furnished. He's got a Spider-Man duvet there just to highlight his innocence and vulnerability. Now, you could say this film is playing to the liberal audience demographic who want to believe that these young people have just been put on the wrong path, but that's what it definitely does. It goes out of its way to demolish a stereotype that the mainstream right-wing media have perpetuated. And it's worth just pausing at this point to think, why have these negative stereotypes been allowed to flourish? Perhaps this is something to do with the fact that young people themselves so often find themselves without a voice in society, and thus without the power to change these negative representations. So by the end of that film, Sam, having initially agreed with the assessment of the neighbour, has seen the goodness, as the drug dealer says, quite sweet really, aren't they? Says Ron. By the end, Sam very much agrees. They're my neighbours, she tells the police. And we get to see that young people aren't the demonic monsters terrorising the blocks that we've been led to believe. Our final text begins in a very similar fashion. 2013 McDonald's advert, Parallel Lives, begins with an establishing shot of a high-rise block of flats. There's some banging dubstep playing in the background and on the non-diegetic soundtrack, and you might think, here we go again, it's the same old. We then cut to a group of young people. Is the term sodcasting, playing music by their mobile phones, and cut to an old man alone, walking, playing into that stereotype of the young people. Here, the mainstream media has kind of expected the narrative to play out, that they would terrorise him, they would intimidate him. What happens here? He walks merrily by, totally, unintimidated, and they're both, as we see, going about their lives, living very, coexisting quite happily, the old man and the group of young people. So this is a text, and what it offers us is a judgment-free representation of the young. There's no negative judgment here. Now, McDonald's are a corporation that's easy to criticise, but this is a progressive representation of young people that they're offering us through this advert. So it really does try and take that stereotype again and challenge it to us and say we don't have to subscribe to this negative judgment that is often attached to young people within the media. Okay, so that's your 3 texts. Good luck with the exam if that particular question comes up, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.